We continue to hope for a 2020 college football season here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We welcome you in for another live stream tonight. We're talking Notre Dame football on a Monday night with Nathan Erbach and also Mason Plummer from Slap the Sign. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, Mark. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Again, considering the circumstances, we're all hunkered down and staying quarantined and hoping for the best and expecting the best, in my case at least. And a lot of talk continues about the 2020 college football season, and I'm sure we'll dive into that in future weeks in regards to, and I'm sure the questions are coming because they come every time I go live, people wanting me to predict when there will be workouts and training camp and practice and then a season. I'm not a doctor. Even the doctors don't know. I don't have the models perfected or anything like that. I can give you my thoughts, certainly, but it's a lot of speculation. All right, we're talking Notre Dame football. We ask everyone to leave your comments and questions in the live chat. We will get to them, and I will pass them along to Nathan and to Mason. And, of course, if I have something to say, I'll dive into that as well. We will be posting a poll on Twitter, on my Twitter page, the Voice of College Football poll tonight, which will be posted very soon after the show, is going to give your opinion on the level of Notre Dame recruiting and whether Notre Dame can compete in recruiting for a national championship. So it's going to be stated like this: can Notre Dame recruit at an elite level in the current landscape of college football? So the way things stand right now, do you think Notre Dame, which we could argue is recruiting just that step below in that 5 to 15 range, something in that range over the past several seasons in regards to recruiting rankings, and whether they can compete at an even higher level that seems to be necessary to win a national championship? I think that's been pretty well established and confirmed. So, Mason, what do you think about the question? What do you think about Notre Dame's status? You know, we've certainly talked about this, of where they are, the good things they've done, but maybe where they're lacking just a bit.
Yeah, recruiting at an elite level is not something that's easy to do, and I think we've harped on the things that makes it more difficult at Notre Dame in the past. I think Notre Dame's recruiting is vastly improved in the past few years, and it's only going upwards. Whether they're at the elite level or not depends on your definition of elite. To me, I don't think they're at the elite level yet. I think elite is consistently a top 5 class, and they're not there yet. They need a top 5 class to even be considered. So I think it's on the up and coming, but they're not there yet. Not quite.
Any thoughts,
Mark,
Nathan?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, they're kind of right in that step below, or that tier below. I think they have classes that if certain guys were to hit that maybe weren't at, like the star rating that they were, or if they get an elite quarterback or something like that, then, maybe they could win it with the classes they've had. But I think in general, they probably have to land 1 or 2 more guys per cycle that are considered more of that elite status for sure. So I would say they're in the tier below. But I think it's completely possible, especially with the way they've been playing on the field. Winning, I think me and Mason talk about this all the time, winning helps. So, you get those, you maybe stockpile a few more 10-plus win seasons in there, and you're going to start getting guys that want to come there more consistently for sure.
Well, I like the explanation there, because we can all sit here and say, okay, and I think Mason's right on in regards to what an elite class is. And I don't think that's just a blind top 5 class. If you look at generally the teams in the top 5 year in, year out, those are the teams that are competing for college football playoff appearances every year and national championships on a regular basis. So it's not just a random, got to be top 5. I think that's pretty much where it is. Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama are always in the top 5, and then other teams break into that top 5 at times, like an LSU and like some others, Texas, but they're not. LSU certainly broke through this last season, but was not competing at a national championship level with 3 and 4 losses before that. We'll see what they're able to do, and if they're able to sustain this without Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. But I also like, Nathan, that you kind of gave us some indication as to because it's one thing to say, okay, these are the top 4 or 5 classes in the nation, and Notre Dame finished 9th, for example, this year. I'm just throwing out a number. They're usually in that range. But exactly what is it going to take? What does it take for any class, Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan, that's in that range of a top 8 to 12 class to get to a top 4 or 5 class? And it's probably, like you say, about 3 guys, without running the numbers and the metrics, 3 like 4 to 5 star guys that need to be added.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go from like getting 22 guys to 25 or 26. It just means that, 3 of those guys need to be replaced with 3 better players, I guess, is really what I was getting at. And then I guess, like, just to add to my QB comment, I think Clemson and LSU this year specifically kind of proved that if you get an elite talent at QB, then that can also change. I think Clemson was actually recruiting around the same level that Notre Dame is right now 5-6 years ago. But then they get Deshaun Watson, and that changes things. And then that's kind of catapulted them into obviously getting Trevor Lawrence, who's an elite QB at the college level and an NFL prospect. And then that's also catapulted them into landing better classes in general. And then LSU, they get Joe Burrow in a transfer from Ohio State. Maybe coaching had a little bit to do with that with Joe Brady and stuff like that as well. But, Joe Burrow had one of the most historic seasons in the history of college football for a quarterback this past season. So that catapulted them to, going from a, 9 to 10 win team into a national championship, and by far the best team in football this year.
Yeah, and I think the difference is coming in with a quarterback that's ranked. I don't know if everybody follows recruiting nearly as closely as Nathan and I do, but Trevor Lawrence is ranked as highly as you can possibly be on 24/7 Sports. And we're talking like the difference between, Phil Yurkovich had all the hype coming into Notre Dame, and he's rated quite a bit lower than a guy like Trevor Lawrence. So Notre Dame needs that top of the top guy, another Jimmy Clausen per se, that would bring in other recruits with him like Clausen did.
Yeah, and I mentioned the NFL draft, and the positions that are cited by NFL draft gurus in regards to what builds an NFL championship team. And of course, every position is important, and you can't have an awful offensive line or an awful anything and really compete at an elite level. Certainly, you're going to have some units that are just going to be better than others. But quarterback, edge rusher, left tackle, and to a certain extent, the entire offensive line and corners are elite players that are a scarce commodity at the NFL draft level in regards to what they're looking for. They can find guards, they can find linebackers, they can find defensive linemen inside, but edge rushers, cornerbacks, left tackles in particular, and then at the top of the heap, of course, quarterbacks. You almost have to weight it to a certain extent, and I'm one who tries to back off on the quarterback hype because we tend to talk quarterbacks constantly, but it is the most important position, so you almost would have to, in a sense, go through the entire metrics of football and kind of weight the class, because if you sign 22 kids and you've got the 5th rated class in the country, but the worst recruit that you signed was a quarterback versus the best, and they're all weighted the same, the guard, the quarterback, the linebacker, the safety, they're all weighted the same, well, there could be some imbalance and a bit of skewed effect to the rankings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I think the other thing is QBs tend to bring other talent with them. And I've noticed that even with Notre Dame classes, when Notre Dame tends to sign a QB early on, which is kind of been their forte in the last 3 or 4 classes, even if it's not maybe the elite level QB, like this past year's QB, Drew Pine, is a borderline 4-star prospect on 24/7 Sports. I think me and Mason both think he's a pretty good quarterback, kind of like an Ian Book type. But landing him early brought guys onto that class, whether or not that meant that those guys were going to win the national championship. Guys wanted to play for him. And so now they have Tyler Buckner, their 2021 commit, who's one of the top QBs in the country, on 24/7 Sports for the 2021 recruiting class. And I think he's kind of doing the same thing. I mean, he had two wide receivers committed to Notre Dame right after him or right before him possibly. but they were all kind of around the same time. One has recently decommitted, but I mean, he's definitely brought some talent with him as well, and I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, I have to agree. I really think that the big quarterback signing is something that, especially guys on the offensive side of the ball really want to see, whether it's tight ends, running backs, offensive linemen, wide receivers, you name it. They really see success, and you see in college football, you see success with the star quarterback, and they really want to play for the star quarterback.
Yeah, and I would think an offensive lineman who's looking to go to the NFL, I think the tape's going to show everything with any offensive lineman, but a wide receiver with a bad quarterback, he's thinking.
That was LSU before Joe Burrow, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. These guys that are catching 35 passes a year suddenly putting up video game kind of numbers this past season for LSU, catching 85, 90 balls for 1,500 yards and 18, 20 touchdowns, crazy numbers out of wide receivers who before that, were catching 30, 35 passes a season. Exactly. So I would think especially the wide receivers would gravitate to the elite quarterbacks to show themselves off for the NFL. Stylight has joined the conversation. Why is Notre Dame scared of recruiting linebackers?
I think he's talking about how last class they didn't take a linebacker, and so far this year they haven't really offered too many. I'm not too worried, as the defensive coordinator, Clark Lee, is also the linebackers coach, and that's been one of their top position groups the last 10 years, even at Notre Dame. So I'm not too worried about linebackers. They have one of the best linebackers in the country coming back next year, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Drew White's coming back, who led the team in tackles last year, or was tied for the lead with Owusu-Koramoah. And then they have a lot of really talented guys behind them that were top-notch recruits prior to coming to Notre Dame as well.
Yeah, I don't see it being a problem unless for some reason Notre Dame misses. They missed on the last class, and if they miss on linebackers again in this class, then that becomes a problem when you're relying on guys like guys down the line that, if injuries happen, then you're left with a hole like Notre Dame's seeing at cornerback now.
John Sarian bringing up a topic that is pretty frequently a subject matter when talking about Notre Dame recruiting, and that's academics. So do we think that gets in the way too much?
So that's an interesting question. I do think it limits them at least a little bit. You always hear from some of the people that maybe follow recruiting to the T and know each kid inside and out. I think Notre Dame, like when you look at like maybe a top 50 list, they can probably recruit about half of those guys, maybe less. But at the same time, they need to do a better job of landing the guys that can get into Notre Dame. So, for example, this year, Will Shipley, it looks like it's going to be a Notre Dame and Clemson battle. He's one of the top running backs in the country. He's a 5-star recruit, or borderline 5-star right now. If he ends up at Clemson, that's a loss. He's a kid that could be at Notre Dame, but he's also getting recruited by the top programs in the country. So those are the type of battles they need to start winning. But of course, academics is always a battle, when it comes to Notre Dame, for sure.
Yeah, to echo what Nathan was saying, if you look at a top 50 list, Notre Dame can recruit half those guys. That's absolutely accurate. But, academics is more difficult. And if you're thinking about it from a recruit perspective, if any of us were a recruit and, you're a top-notch guy, why go to a school where you have to try harder when you could just go, Joe Burrow was very open about saying, I take online classes at LSU. So rather than having to show up and actually put in a lot of effort at Notre Dame, it takes a special kind of kid that wants to put in just as much work in the classroom as he does on the field. But to say that they don't get a little bit of help would be ignorant, because they do. All athletes do. They get a little bit of help. But there's no doubt that it's more difficult to succeed at Notre Dame and to get recruits to Notre Dame than it would be at an Alabama, LSU, Georgia type school.
Now, I am not saying in any way that this situation offsets the other in terms of the numbers, because the case I'm going to bring up probably happens 1 to every 10 times the other situation happens. But I got to think that in the rare instance where the kid is really academically minded and really talented, that it works in the favor of a Stanford and Notre Dame, that they can say, okay, in addition to being a football powerhouse, you have first-rate, world-class academics as well. So again, I'm not saying that situation is anywhere near in the volume of the other end of the spectrum, but there are those cases in which the university can sell itself to a top flight football player who's also a really smart guy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's plenty of examples of a kid that gets a Notre Dame or a Stanford offer, and not that they necessarily commit on the spot, but there's certainly a following, and that's not just because Notre Dame is a well-known traditional program. I mean, that helps as well. But there are definitely kids. They get an offer, they have an interview with 24/7 Sports or Rivals, and the first thing they mention is elite academics, and you can tell which kids want to be at those schools. And I think Notre Dame overall does a pretty good job of recruiting them, but it could definitely be a step up.
I think it depends on the kid's priorities as well. Is it somebody that they're looking to play their 3 years of football and then go straight to the NFL? They're banking on, all their eggs in the NFL basket, or are you talking about a kid, Notre Dame likes to put out the 4 for 40, so where you're putting in your 4 years and 40 years down the line, you're in a great spot. So where you're getting your degree, and a Notre Dame degree holds a lot of weight in today's world, especially when it comes to business and stuff like that. The Mendoza College of Business is nationally regarded as one of the best. So that's where you see a lot of guys studying as well. So it just depends on what your priorities are. Do you want a great degree where you can do something after football? Maybe the NFL doesn't work out. It only takes, one big injury to knock you out forever. So it just depends on where a guy's priorities are at.
And I think the important thing, just kind of saying one more thing about that, I think when academics and like maybe the religious institution part of Notre Dame gets brought up, a lot of the time people think that, guys like me and Mason or other people that follow Notre Dame and are fans of Notre Dame are saying that we're like Notre Dame's better. I don't think that that's really what we're trying to say. It's just different. And, and it shows. I mean, recruiting wise, they suffer a little bit because of those kind of things. And we fully admit that. But it's not to say that, Notre Dame is a better school or better program to go to than, say, Georgia. It's just it requires a different kid to go there. That's all it really is. It doesn't mean that the kids that go to Georgia are bad people or anything like that. And I think people get that confused.
John Sarian brings up a decent point. There are strong years for recruiting, just like there are strong years for NFL drafts. And then there are weaker years at each individual position and as a whole. So, yeah, you could have a number 4 class that's as strong as a number 1 class in another year. Obviously, I think way beyond that, because I got to think we're talking 20 to 25 players for 130 FBS teams and for 75 Power 5 teams. We're talking about thousands of players. I got to think that there's not a huge disparity. It's not like the number 7 class one year is better than the number 1 class the next year. I got to think that while there's some validity to what John's saying here, it's rather minute. What I would say, though, to play off of his point, is that if we could go back and re-rank, now this would be an exhaustive thing to do, and I would love to have somebody else do it because I don't want to do it, but basically go back and re-rank the classes. And I know that individual beat writers have done that for particular schools like Penn State or whatever, but they do it in a vacuum. So they basically say, we had the 8th rated class, but it really didn't turn out to be that good. We should have been more like 15 to 20. Well, you didn't rank everybody in the country, re-rank them. And obviously there are 5th ranked classes out there that turned out to be the 15th or 20th best class and vice versa. But over time, again, the numbers speak to it. Basically, if you're recruiting a top 3 to 5 class every year, sure, a couple may just be top 10 classes in actuality on the field, but it's all going to play out, and the rankings are very accurate over time in bulk.
Yeah, and I think taking that a little bit of a step further, just on a normal, if you just look class by class, one of my favorite things to do is look at the class rating versus the class ranking, because it doesn't take into account how many kids are in a class. So, like, just to give an example, Texas A&M one year might sign 26 kids, and Notre Dame might sign 18. Well, Texas A&M signed, 8 more kids. But when you look at the class as a whole, did Notre Dame have more 4-stars? Did they have a higher ranked class when it came to the guys they signed? That's kind of where I was bringing up the whole idea from Clemson a few years ago, where it looked like Clemson was traditionally like more of a top 8 to 15 recruiting class, but those top 5 to 6 guys were elite, or right there with the elite classes. And that's what Notre Dame's been doing a better job at recently. So I think, for example, this year on 24/7 Sports, they finished with like the 17th ranked recruiting class. But when you looked at the rating, it was like number 9. That's a big discrepancy for me, and it shows that the 16 or 17 kids that they landed are better than the 26 kids that another class landed that might be ranked 10th instead of 17th overall.
Yeah, and I have something to add to that as well. As when you talk about the 2020 class and you're looking through, there's a lot of big time talents, but then you have guys that lower the average class score as well. So you have the top long snapper in the nation rated as the lowest 3-star possible, as rated as an 80.30. So that drains a guy that's like Michael Mayer that's rated at a 98. That takes the whole class average down a ton, and then you're taking a defensive end from Germany, Alex Ahrensberger, that's taken solely on potential, but he's rated as a 3-star because nobody can really tell how good he is. He plays in Germany. So you got to take those things into account as well.
Yeah, another good point. If the guy's going to end up being a special teams player and he's just going to be decent at that role, whether he's a 78 or an 81, that could make a difference in the recruiting class, but did it make any difference on the field? We got our guy 288028 chiming in. Braden Lindsay and Chris Tyree bringing home run speed to the skill spots. Where will Kelly utilize these guys, and what kind of impact will they have this season?
They do bring the home run speed. Those are probably 2 of the fastest guys they've had under Brian Kelly. I think both have been timed in, the 4.3s, and they're both track guys coming out of high school. Lindsay's supposed to be the number 2, I think, this year, or at least in the starting 11 on offense. He's going to be one of the starters at wide receiver. And we saw his impact last year. I think he had like 4 or 5 touchdowns, and he only had, I think, a total of 20 touches. We saw what he could bring. And then Chris Tyree, I don't know how much he'll play this year. He's an incoming freshman, but he definitely brings something to the offense that they don't currently have, which is home run speed at running back. I think even if he doesn't necessarily start or get 10 to 15 touches a game, you give him kind of what maybe Braden Lindsay did last year, and you're looking at someone that's going to be dynamic for you in certain roles.
Right. Yeah, you're looking at Braden Lindsay in the wide receiver group. Definitely the number 2 wide receiver behind Kevin Austin. He brings the speed, and Kevin Austin brings the size. I think Kevin Austin is a great comp to Chase Claypool. Whether he'll have the kind of season Claypool had, that was an unreal season this past season. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And the Notre Dame running back room is a bit of a mess right now. No one really knows what's happening with Jafar Armstrong, whether he'll play more out of the slot with Lawrence Keys or whether he'll be a true running back. He's never really looked like he recovered from his torn abdominal muscle against Louisville. So when you're talking about Jameer Smith, other guys in the running back room, whether Sebo Flemister breaks out again, I think Chris Tyree has a chance to get some early touches, and if he succeeds with those, there's no reason that he shouldn't get 5 to 10 touches a game if he's successful in the little spurts that he gets touches in the beginning of the season, assuming we have a season.
And speaking of recruiting rankings, Braden Lindsay, the 10th rated athlete at the athlete spot out of Portland, Oregon in the 2018 class. And for Mr. Chris Tyree, he was the 2nd rated all-purpose back, number 1 rated according to the 247 Sports Composite, number 69 rated player in the country. So again, for people that don't follow recruiting, that's way, way up there. Number 69 rated all, regardless of position, number 1 rated player out of Virginia in the current class, 2020.
Yeah, and he actually dropped. For a long time, he was a borderline 5-star, and I think at one point he actually was a 5-star recruit, Chris Tyree, that is. So he dropped in those final rankings, and I think a lot of it had to do with some minor injuries he had while in high school. He did his junior and senior years. He didn't necessarily he was hobbled a little bit, I guess, and then some of the camp settings and different things like that, he wasn't able to be his best self. So I think, to be honest with you, I think he's probably better than the ranking he's at right now. But like you said, still, being top 70 is great. So
I have to agree with that as well. And I thought it was interesting that an Oklahoma guy, or at least looks like it, Oklahoma and Notre Dame, it was down to those last 2 for Tyree's commitment. So I wonder if that's an Oklahoma guy following Tyree through his college career.
Yes, the guy that commented on the live stream, definitely an Oklahoma fan who follows us for a long time. Good guy. The unofficial #1 Michigan State fan is also joining us. So we've got fan bases all over the place, of course, that follow all our live streams, and we talk Notre Dame football and do our best to come here to talk football with you each and every Monday night at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And our #1 Michigan State fan is hoping the Sparty and the Irish get back together. Are there any plans in the works? Any series signed?
I think I was looking some stuff up because I remember looking it up a while back, and because I think I've mentioned on this show a few times now that I really liked it, or I would love to see Purdue and Michigan State back on the schedule. I think 2026 is what I saw that they're scheduled to play both Purdue and Michigan State. So, and then after that, I think it's kind of like every other year for a few years, and that's about it.
I'm looking that up right now for you. I was hoping you'd talk a little bit longer so I could look that up.
Yeah, we got 2026.
In South Bend, that's what it looks like, yep.
Yes, and then in East Lansing the next year, 2026, 2027. And just to give it a quick look here, the quote-unquote big games, and when I say big games, I'm generally meaning Power 5 games. In 2020, you got Arkansas, obviously the worst team in the SEC over the last couple of years. And then the ACC games, I'll bypass the ACC games in particular, but just some games of note go outside of the ACC and the USC Navy Stanford games. 2021 at let's see, Wisconsin, of course, in 2020 and 2021. I did not realize those are 2 games against the Badgers.
Yeah, it's Lambeau and Soldier Field back to back.
Good stuff. 2022 at Ohio State. That should be a fun one. Taking on Cal that year. And then the next year, Ohio State returns to South Bend. And again, most of the rest of the schedule is the ACC, USC, and Navy. Texas A&M's a home and home in 2024 and 25. As Nathan mentioned, Purdue's on the schedule in 2024. And then back in 2026, a home and home. 2027, they're back on the schedule. So it's 2 home and homes with the Boilermakers. And Alabama's on the schedule in 2028 and 29, a home and home. And yeah. And then
we could be looking at a completely different college football.
Back into it. What's that, Nathan?
So we could be looking at a completely different college football at that point in time.
We certainly could.
Can't imagine Saban stays that long. That could be a different Alabama team by that time.
Yeah, right. It's probably long gone by then as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so if we look up, what was that, 2028, I guess that's 8 years away. I guess we got to go a little bit further than that in the past to see a much different Alabama program. But anybody out there that's only been watching college football for about 10 years, look up Alabama football, like 04, 5, 6, 7 in that range. You will actually see a 3-8 season, if you can believe that, not that long ago. So Nick Saban did make a bit of a difference there. All right. We've just concluded a decade of college football. So, of course, those were easy to keep track of in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But then once we got into the 2000s, maybe it doesn't necessarily click as much. But, of course, between 2000 and 09, that was a decade. And then we just completed 2019. So the decades of the 21st century and the teens just completed. I actually posted a video a couple months ago, right after the 2019 season, rating my top 10 quarterbacks of the decade of the teens. And I've got a list of games that I was going to run down as well, my top 25 games of the past decade. So with you guys in play here, we'll love to hear who you're knocking around as the all-decade team at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, I think quarterback comes down to 2 guys, especially based off of talent level more so than longevity. But Ian Book has to be in there. I think if he has a season that he's had, just like an average season for him that he's had the past 2 years, he's going to be, I think, second all time in a lot of Notre Dame record books. So you got to put him in there. And then the other guy I was thinking of was Deshaun Kaiser for quarterback. That one might be a little bit more talent driven than production wise versus Ian Book. But And then Reese, I see Reese showing up here, and Reese would probably be third, and that's more of a longevity thing for sure. So those would be my top 3 quarterbacks in the Notre Dame decade.
Yeah, I went through and did my list. The only one I put was Kaiser. Both of those names came to mind, but I have Kaiser as my clear number 1. I think Book has a potential to surpass him, but speaking just solely right now, I guess I wasn't sure if we're talking about the 2020 season as well, but yeah, definitely have Kaiser as my number 1. Probably based on talent, I guess. I think he could have been successful in the NFL, but he went to the Browns where quarterbacks go to die. So,
and I think he left a year early too. If he could have stayed one more season, I think that could have helped him a lot.
Did you guys field these teams across the board, every position?
I did.
So I wrote for Slap the Sign. I had a series that went out like right around the new year, and I was actually trying to look it up just to make sure I don't contradict myself. But there are a bunch of different articles. But I remember most of the guys I was able to put on the list, so we can definitely keep going.
Yeah, all right. I want to hear this. Running backs.
I think the easy answer is Josh Adams. I mean, he's one of the looking like kind of the same thing with Book when you look at the stats. His 3 years in Notre Dame were some of the most productive that anybody's ever had in a Notre Dame uniform at the running back position. A couple other guys have had more like one season wonders, like CJ Procise. Dexter Williams is a good example of that. But no, Josh Adams to me is number 1, and then you got to look at guys like Theo Riddick, who was up there as kind of like a wide receiver running back combo. Sierra Wood, he's not maybe the most popular name around Notre Dame parts these days, but
Yikes.
Definitely had some good years running the football. But Josh Adams to me is the clear guy.
Yeah, I had Adams on mine as well. I had Dexter Williams so if Adams is the 1A, then Dex is the 1B. I think if Dex has a full Notre Dame career, given that Adams wasn't ahead of him, then we could be talking about Dex potentially being better. But yeah, so I think that's a good running back room right there.
So Everett Golson in leading this team to a national championship game doesn't factor in, no mentions there.
I mean, that was pretty much his only good season, and even then it wasn't great. I mean, I think actually you'd probably argue the season after he came back was better. He just threw a lot of interceptions and fumbled the ball a whole lot. So definitely, I mean, I think he's probably number 2 if you look at just talent-wise behind Kaiser. But he couldn't tame himself, I guess, enough.
Who do we like at the wide receiver position from 2010 to 19?
This one's another easy one for me. Michael Floyd, even though he only had 2 years in that decade, and then Will Fuller. Chase Claypool would be a distant third, but because he wasn't a one-hit wonder for his senior season, but that was definitely like far and away his best season. And then TJ Jones kind of comes in maybe in that 4 slot for me. But Floyd and Will Fuller, I think, are an easy combo.
Yeah, I think it's 1A and 1B, Floyd, Fuller, and then I had Claypool as my third as well. I wasn't sure if we were doing 2 or 3 wide receivers, but yeah, then in that next group, TJ Jones. If you want to throw one season in, Miles Boykins, 1 season was great. Trying to think of any other names that come to mind. I think that's about it.
Of course, Notre Dame has fielded some of the better offensive lines in the country for the past few years. Who gets the nod up front?
Ooh, I mean, you could pretty much name their offensive line that's in the NFL right now. Ronnie Stanley, one of the top left tackles. Zach Martin was obviously a left tackle at Notre Dame and one of the best guards in the NFL. Quentin Nelson, same thing. Nick Martin, brother of Zach Martin, one of the best centers. Sam Mustipher might have something to say about that at Notre Dame. Mike McGlinchey, who played right tackle and left tackle at Notre Dame. To me, that's probably the line right there. Because Zach Martin didn't play guard, you probably got to throw in a guy like Alex Bars, maybe a Tommy Kramer, even though he hasn't reached his full potential at Notre Dame yet. There's some Chris Watt was a guy that was pretty good. I think in the 2012-2013 range season. So no, I mean that one's another pretty easy one for me.
Yeah, super easy. Mine going from left to right, Stanley, Nelson, both Martins, and then McGlinchey. So, yeah, across the board, that's one of the best offensive lines from a decade you're ever going to see.
Pinero 5 Piru. He's our Michigan fan that joins us for just about every live stream. Joins us for Florida State, Miami, and Ohio State. He's got to take a beat down every week talking Buckeyes, but he joins us all the time. So, Pinero 5, we appreciate it. salutes me every time too. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. We just posted a video that did rather well, looking at the talent gap between Ohio State and Michigan. So you had to suffer through that. All right. This has to be the most common misspelling in college football, placing the R in front of the T. Can't do that, Michigan State fan.
You'd be surprised how many recruits do that, though.
the recruits. Well, hey, if they're going to come and score touchdowns for you, I guess you can excuse that. But yeah. So,
I've seen guys do Notre Dame University as well. That's rough.
I think that one irks me more than anything. If you can't get like the university versus in front or behind, or if it's a college, like I think saw a guy the other day. Notre Dame landed a basketball transfer from Santa Clara, and someone called it a JUCO, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Santa Clara College is actually a pretty good D1 university and very good academically as well.
All right. April 20th. If I wasn't an Ohio State fan, Notre Dame would be my team. Oh, well then, F Notre Dame. Okay.
So not a very strong second favorite then, I guess.
Yeah, that there must be dropping off the cliff after that. Well, April 20th, we appreciate you joining us regardless.
Mine would not be Ohio State if he wants to know.
Yeah. We enjoy the trash talk regardless. So just bring it. As long as we're not being personally offensive, bring the trash talk. That's all fine. Fine and good. These guys don't mind it. All right. Defensive line. That's been a good position for the Irish, too, in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think at the end spots, you probably got to put Tuitt in there for sure. And then Aquara and Kareem probably have to fill the other spot. Defensive line, I mean, you have Tillery, more recent. Sheldon Day was really, really good, and he's still in the NFL. I don't know who's Lewis Nix, Irish Chocolate, I guess is what they called him. He was another good one. But no, I think that would probably be my line. It'd be Tuitt on one end, Tillery, Sheldon Day, and then you'd have to pick between Kareem and Aquara. But that's a tough one for me.
That's exactly what I had. So. Got nothing else to add.
Okay. Linebacker.
Teo and Jalen Smith are easily 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I mean, those are two of the greatest linebackers in college football history for my money. And then, I mean, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who we talked about recently. I mean, I guess he's technically going to be in another decade if they have a season this year. But the year he had last year was really good. Drew Tranquill. Is a guy that's beloved at Notre Dame. Tavon Coney, same thing. So I think style, I put Joe Schmidt. I love Joe Schmidt to death, but I wouldn't put Joe Schmidt in my top decade team, at least above those guys. But yeah, no, I think I'd probably go Smith, Teo, and then I'd probably go Drew Tranquill. No more because he was the heart and soul.
Yeah, I think so. I'd definitely go Jalen Smith, Manti Teo. And then for my third one, actually, I think he's going to be so good this season that Owusu-Koramoah could be that third. I think he has the potential to be better than Tranquill, better than Schmidt, better than Coney. Niles Morgan came to mind kind of for some reason. But yeah, I think Owusu-Koramoah is just that good.
Yeah, the thing with Koramoah is going to suck because I wonder how many decade teams he's going to make at Notre Dame because he had one really good season in this past decade, and then he's going to have one really good season the next decade and then probably be a first-round pick. So it's going to be – you have to kind of weigh longevity versus elite, I guess.
Put them on both.
Right, exactly. I'm down.
We have call-in shows here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, also Friday at noon Eastern Time. That doesn't limit me to not necessarily just jumping on here at any time for another call-in show, but those are the ones that are set and promised to you that we deliver each and every Sunday and Friday. Talk Notre Dame football on Mondays, Florida State on Tuesdays. We talk Ohio State and Miami as well. Do those live streams that have to be scheduled each and every week. That's why it's important for you to subscribe and get the notifications. Everybody's staying inside these days, shopping Amazon. Use the link in the description section of any of the videos, and you help us build the channel. All right, I'm going to take you guys back. No. We got to finish our all-decade team. Let's go to corners and safeties, Nathan.
I mean, Harrison Smith, definitely number one. Obviously, he's one of the top linebackers in the NFL, or top safeties in the NFL as well. Two of the most recent guys honestly deserve a lot of praise as well, and Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott. And then I also think you got to throw in Matthias Farley, who's kind of still roaming in the NFL as well. So those are probably my four guys at safety. But I would probably go. I'm a big Elliott fan. I'm a bigger Elliott fan than most people are. So I would definitely go Elliott and Smith, I think, at safety. And then corner, Julian Love's number one. Everybody else is a distant second. But I would go probably Bennett Jackson, number two, and then maybe Troy Pride as well. Could be up there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any discrepancies. I had Love, and then I had Kavari Russell as my other corner.
No,
I
forgot about Russell for sure.
He's a good corner. Safety, yeah, Harrison Smith, Matthias Farley. Was Troy Nicholas the safety? Is that right?
No, I mean Nicholas was a D end, and then he moved to tight end.
That's right. Okay. Who am I thinking? Zeke Mata. That's who it is.
Okay, yeah. Zeke Mata was one of the top guys on the 2012 defense, but
Yep.
I always remember the 2012 championship game, and a lot of people wanted to destroy Teo for that game, but I thought Zeke Mata looked a lot worse.
Right. Yeah, for sure. No doubt.
Well, Teo had a target on him for obvious reasons, being the All-American, and he's the name everybody knew.
Yeah, and I think, was that – I always forget. I mean, 2012 was my first year out of high school, so not that I was young, but I forgot if it was announced already about the girlfriend stuff, if that had come out prior to the game and that was weighing on him, or if maybe he knew it was going to come out. But I always feel like that probably
yeah, sure,
weighed on him a little bit too, and I don't like to do
absolutely.
You got to figure he knew about it before it all broke, and that might even have been worse, rather than everybody else knowing that it's all on him, weighing all on him. So
right,
that's a tough scene.
Absolutely.
And I saw the 28 add 28 bring up Hamilton. I think we maybe, even though he's only going to have 1 year like Jock, I mean, even though it was a freshman season, I think Kyle Hamilton has to be brought up for safety as well because he's that good. But
From a pure talent standpoint, 100%.
Right, and he'll easily be in the 2020 to 2029.
First round pick upcoming.
Our Oklahoma guy, 28 AD 28, which is of course an honor and tribute to all day Adrian Peterson, delivering some strong Notre Dame information for us.
Yeah.
All right, Nathan, you're going to set us up for the next topic. This doesn't have to be drawn out for too long. I don't know how much you guys have to say about it, but I've got a pretty simple statement to make about it. So I responded to a comment that you had made this week on Twitter, citing that you were taking in the 1993 Notre Dame Florida State game, a game in which the Irish won in South Bend against the number one team in the nation, 31-24, and the Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward. So you can take it from there.
Yeah, so I need to suffice this by saying I was 8 months old when that game was actually played. So I did not obviously watch it live. I don't really know the history of that season or even the few seasons kind of before and after that outside of my own knowledge of Notre Dame and college football, I guess. But no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I watched it. It was a great game. Notre Dame, I think, actually dominated more than maybe the score indicated. The Florida State had to kind of score. I think they were trying to score a third time, like in 5 minutes, to tie that game. So they they had a valiant effort with a comeback. But no, I get what you're saying here about how Florida State won the national championship that year. Notre Dame beat them head to head, and they had identical records. I mean, to me, like I said, without really knowing any other info, to me that sounds like Notre Dame was robbed of a 1993 national championship.
They were. I don't think.
Yeah, the way things were done then is so weird. It just seems like there's such a clear-cut process now, but you look at some of the other national titles that were claimed by certain schools, and if you're looking at the history of it, it'll make you mad.
Yeah, well, that's actually one thing I respect about Notre Dame as a fan and an analyst now. From my understanding, I don't think they've claimed any national championships, even though I know people think that they have the right to a few of them, like 1993, for example. So I'm happy they don't. I think Alabama claims 3 or 4 that they're not supposed to have, or a couple at least. I think a lot of people say that about them. I don't really know the history of some other programs enough to comment, but I know Alabama's been the one that I've heard about the most.
Well, UCF does too, right? 2018, they planned one.
I have no issue with UCF claiming a national championship. I don't have an issue with that. They won all the games. What else could they do? They did everything they could possibly do to win a national championship that year.
That doesn't mean you win the national championship, though, just because you go undefeated.
I agree that they went undefeated.
What else could they do?
Then
Then it's basically impossible for them to win a national championship.
Get a better schedule. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really the only response.
They beat a team in the bowl game that beat the two teams that played in the national championship game. If anything wasn't more ironic in a beautifully poetic way, it's that UCF beat Auburn, who beat the two teams playing in the national championship game, and not only did that, but he beat them in the same stadium that they played the national championship game in.
I think Stylet makes a good point over here. The same poll that gave UCF the championship in that year gave Notre Dame the championship in 2012, even though they got boat raced by Alabama.
I saw that same poll too, actually. And I was reading through it, and I was shocked to see Notre Dame. That was a good team, but yeah, they absolutely boat raced by Alabama. So,
but the difference, like Mark is saying, I guess, is we had the opportunity to beat Alabama and be the national championship, and be
right
versus UCF didn't have the opportunity to be in the college football playoff and prove themselves, but won their bowl game and went 13-0 or whatever it was. So no, I don't think they should claim it, but I do think that maybe to a certain extent they got the short end of the stick.
Oh, I don't think that they were I don't think they were the best team in the country. I don't think they were one of the 5 best teams in the country. So I'm not making that claim. I'm not arguing that UCF was the national champion or was the best team in the country. I don't even think they were one of the 5 best teams in the country. Maybe not even one of the 10 best teams in the country. Something in that range. But I'm all for teams saying, you know what, screw this system because it sucks. We won all our games. What were we supposed to do? So we're going to claim a national championship. And going back to the 1993 situation, it's very cut and dry for me. And this is one of the reasons why I devalue the national championship. Is we could go through the history of college football, and I actually started a series last off season where I went year by year by year to basically just raise some eyebrows and say, you know what, this is what happened, but do we realize that Team A and Team B and Team C had just as good a resumes, and they were either, depending on whether it was the poll era or the BCS era or now the playoff era, either they were left out of the equation or they were left out of the playoff system or the BCS when they had just as good a resume as the teams that participated.
Right. No, that's exactly what it is. I mean, UCF didn't have the resume. They didn't really play anybody until they beat Auburn. And even then, didn't Auburn have like 2 or 3 losses that year, and then they happened to beat both Alabama and was it Georgia? Was it Georgia that they also beat? That was the year that Georgia wins the national championship.
Yeah, so Auburn won the SEC Auburn beat Georgia in the regular season. Georgia beat Auburn in the in the SEC championship game. And
okay,
I
remember that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Auburn beat Alabama and Georgia 2 of the last 3 weeks of the season when they were both ranked number 1.
Yeah.
So this 1993 situation, just to put a cap on this, Notre Dame finishes 11-1. They win the Cotton Bowl over Texas A&M, a top 5 or 6 team in the country. Florida State wins over Nebraska in the Orange Bowl, 18-16, a game in which Nebraska could have won, but they missed a long field goal at the gun. And Notre Dame again wins the head-to-head. I don't even need to look at the schedules to see the performances other than that. I know that I did look at Notre Dame's schedule. It wasn't quite as strong as I would have guessed it to be, but still, I think a lot of people that are looking back at this 27 years later also see that Notre Dame lost to Boston College, and we had an argument about this, ironically, as you would guess, on my Florida State live stream last week. And so the Florida State guy that brought it up, that wanted to argue with me, assumed that Boston College was horrible just because he didn't look it up. Well, it's Boston College. They were probably 5-6. No, they weren't. They were 9-3. They were in the top 15 in the country. So it was not an awful loss, and they didn't get hammered by 3 touchdowns. They lost on a last-second field goal.
Right, and I think I actually, after you had commented on the Twitter post I put up, I kind of looked at the schedule myself, and I think USC was ranked that year. Michigan State, I believe, was ranked that year. Michigan was ranked number 2 to start the season, I believe, and then Notre Dame beat them. So, I mean, it's not like Notre Dame played some cupcake schedule and then all of a sudden beat Florida State at home and then, beat Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, they played a pretty grueling schedule in '93, and I get it. People want to make, say what they want about Notre Dame in recent years with their schedule and so on and so forth, but that schedule actually stayed really good throughout the entire season, no matter what anybody says.
There you have it. All right. We talk Notre Dame football on a regular basis here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you had any questions, any comments that you want to get to Nathan and Mason, certainly you can copy and paste those and leave that down in the comments section. We will get those to Nathan and Mason. We've got the NFL draft coming up the weekend after next, which we will address next week. All right, guys, any other parting shots for tonight?
Who's Cheryl J? She's calling us out on these comments.
Yeah, I don't know what she wants us to answer. She said
here.
Something about, I'm a Buckeye fan. You boys can't answer my question in all caps. Not sure what her question was.
Okay,
I think she said something about the last national championship, but we just discussed it was 88. Should have been 93.
I'll see if I can find it.
She said something about Eric. Yeah, Eric Parsegian was the coach back a long time ago for ND. He won a national. I think she was obviously just trying to troll.
Yeah, I think so too. Probably not worth the time.
I didn't understand the question, I guess.
Cheryl shows up for me, and she delivers her comments on most of the live streams. So I'm not going to criticize Cheryl any way, shape, or form. I don't know what she's going after here tonight in particular.
She said, "What do you mean committee put Notre Dame in?" I don't know what this is referring to.
Probably 2012 or 2018.
Notre Dame was number 1 in 2012, so there's no debating that. They were ranked ahead of Alabama. Whether they lost or not, that's still true.
Yeah.
Well, I think an Ohio State fan's going to take exception to 2018 because, of course, we had a log jam. But, of course, Notre Dame was undefeated. Ohio State lost a game. 2018, Oklahoma got that. It was really an Oklahoma-Ohio State argument. That was the argument.
Right.
2018, they were the two conference champions.
Yeah, because Notre Dame was undefeated that year. What do you want? I mean,
sure.
I don't know what you want out of that. I mean, they didn't play a UCF schedule.
It's true.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Mason, we appreciate it. Nathan, we appreciate you guys jumping on. Catch these guys at Slap the Sign. Guys, have anything else to promote?
Nope. I think that's it. This was good. We'll see you next Monday, Mark.
Excellent. We'll see everybody back here. We got Florida State Talk coming up tomorrow night, so please check out that and subscribe to get the notifications. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks. I wanted to say